Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking Faith, the weekly devotional where I spend a little bit of time reflecting over my own personal devotions as I've been going through the Word of God in my own personal life and bringing these reflections to you so we can think these things through together. I've been off for a couple of weeks and I thought this might be a good time to potentially reconsider how we do Talking Faith moving forward. So for the next few weeks, I'm going to be recording here from my own desk in the flat, and we'll see how that goes and continue on after that in this style or maybe in a different style. However, just for now, I'd urge you to get yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and join me as we continue talking faith together. And he passed in front of Moses proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. So today I want to think a little bit about God being a patient God. As you're aware, we're going through the book In His Image by Jen Weckling, and that calls us to reflect on God's character. And one of those characteristics is His patience. And I want to potentially start by asking, what is your relationship to patience? Is it something that comes to you easily, or is it something that maybe is relatively difficult? For me personally, patience has never really been a strong suit. I can view myself getting frustrated at the slightest thing, losing my temper when things maybe take too long, or maybe when they don't go the way that I hope. This is particularly apparent when I'm driving. I remember coming up to a mini roundabout not too far from here, actually. And as I approached the roundabout, there was a person that was next to me that was called to go as their turn, but they had no idea what they were doing. And I remember sitting, talking to my friend next to me in the car, just getting so angry. And even saying out loud, people who don't know how to even do a roundabout, I don't think they should be on the road. They should have their licenses revoked. Quite a harsh thing to say. But the person finally got the hint and they drove on. And I continued after this person as I was going the same direction. And in the back of this person's car, there was a Christian fish, a symbol that the early church used when they were facing persecution. And it started to make me kind of feel a little bit bad. I started to think of all the people who potentially I have aggravated through my own actions, perhaps even when I was driving also. And I'd hate to think that I caused them to get as angry as I was being in the car then. I remember thinking, in light of this symbol that I'm seeing, the Christian symbol, how are we called, or how am I called, when it comes to aggravating circumstances? How am I called to act in light of that? How are we called to act in light of that? Well, I think we start by thinking of God and His patience. So when we think of our history with God, the very first thing that I think He clearly says about Himself when He's speaking to Moses is that He is slow to anger. In other words, He is patient with His people. And we see that the whole way through the Old Testament, as there was many prophets and leaders who came calling people to live a life with God and for God, to call them back to a life for God. And for the most part, they didn't do it. They didn't go back to what God was calling them to be. And I spend personally a lot of time working with young folk. And when I ask them to do something, for example, like helping me set up for an event, they are more than happy to seek to do it. However, I can only imagine how frustrated I would be if I asked them and they just said no. Or even more than that, they were like, no, you know what? I'm going to even make it harder for you to set up for this event. I'd imagine them acting in that polar opposite way would be particularly frustrating to me. However, God, He gives His people opportunity after opportunity to follow Him, to follow His new way. We see that the whole way through the Old Testament, and that led all the way through to Jesus. And through Jesus' death and resurrection, He enabled us to follow God. He gave us the strength to follow the path that God calls us to. He calls each and every one of His followers, pre and post Christ, to live a life with God and for God. And He calls us daily to do this, to reflect Him. So my question is, in what way should we reflect Him when it comes to the notion of patience. I think there's two particular ways that we are called. Firstly, we're called to be patient in our relationships with other people. We're called to not get aggravated when others potentially act in ways that would aggravate us. Because God is patient with us, we are called to be patient for other people. I think we see this in Jesus for the 33 years that he lived on this earth. He lived in amongst men and women, sinners, and he dwelled with them and blessed them and called them to follow after God. Even though what they did would have been frustrating and aggravating to him, he just showed them the way to live. And that's who we're called to be. We're called to be people who shine the light of God to people around us, no matter how much they potentially aggravate us, to show his love to them. And then secondly, I think we're called to be patient. And the fact that we're called to tell others of Jesus, no matter how long it takes for them to truly understand. I'm sure many people have felt frustrated in their ministries as they have got involved and they've found that actually it can be quite difficult and it takes a lot of time for people to come to know who God is. We are called in that to be people of patience, to continue to tell us of Jesus no matter how long it takes. We're called to wait for the harvest, if you will. That time that will come where suddenly they'll realize, oh, this is who God is and this is what he's calling me to. He calls us to be patient with him and to continue telling him no matter how long it takes. And I think to do that, we need to ask for the strength of God to be patient as he is patient, to be patient in our relationship with others and patient as we continue to tell others of God. Hopefully that has been an encouragement to you as you've watched the video, and hopefully you've enjoyed this series so far in His Image by Jen Wickling. Have a good day and God bless.